I was folding my table linens that morning when I learned, completely by accident, that my daughter-in-law was planning a birthday dinner for herself. I wasn't told, invited, or even hinted at. I discovered it because my granddaughter, Lily, spoke too quickly on the phone, unaware she was revealing something she wasn't supposed to. She mentioned the fancy Italian restaurant they were all going to on Saturday, then paused abruptly, realizing she had said too much. "Oh, I wasn't supposed to tell you that, Grandma." But the truth was already out, floating between us like a quiet confession. I hung up slowly, trying to convince my heart that it must have been some misunderstanding. Maybe they forgot. Maybe it was meant to be a surprise. Maybe I was assuming too much. But a woman my age has a sixth sense about certain things, and mine whispered without hesitation, this was intentional. And intention stings in a way forgetfulness never does. Forgetfulness can be explained. Intention cannot. It digs deeper, settles heavier, and lingers longer than any careless mistake. I tried to justify it anyway. She must be busy, I told myself. My son probably forgot to mention it. Maybe someone will still call. But no such call came. Instead, I received a notification from the family group chat. My daughter-in-law had sent a photo of the red dress she planned to wear that night. Under it, she wrote words that cut through me more sharply than any knife in my kitchen. It's going to be perfect. Just my people. 3 simple words, but enough to draw a clear border, one that excluded me completely. I stared at that message for a long time. My daughter-in-law had never made an effort to hide her preference for keeping me at a distance, but this was a new kind of cruelty. Exclusion is not quiet. Even when it comes wrapped in politeness and emojis, it screams. Because exclusion isn't passive. It's a decision. And there I was, confronted with the certainty that, in her mind, I wasn't part of the people who mattered. As I sipped my now cold tea, 2 versions of me emerged inside. The Evelyn who felt hurt, and the Evelyn who felt something far sharper, resolve. The hurt Evelyn wanted to cry. The resolved Evelyn wanted to reclaim her dignity. After 70+ years of living, I've learned one thing. A kind woman grows dangerous the moment she stops tolerating disrespect. Because kindness, when misused, hardens into strategy. And strategy in older women has teeth. Then a memory struck me like a beam of light. That perfect dinner she was bragging about? It would be paid for with a credit card linked entirely to my account. A card I allowed them to use during their financial transition. A card she treated as if it were hers. And in that quiet moment, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I made a decision that would turn her perfect night into an unforgettable lesson. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger. Anger is loud. This was something quieter, colder, and far more effective. Certainty. A certainty born from years of being taken for granted. I walked to my drawer of documents, opened my old blue folder, and there it was, the card my daughter-in-law used freely, blissfully unaware that generosity has limits, even when it comes from a mother's heart. I sat by the window, dialed the number on the back of the card, and waited. A young woman answered, cheerful in that way only customer service workers can be early in the morning. She asked if I wanted to cancel the card due to loss, theft, or fraud. I almost laughed. The truth was more poetic than any of her options. But I simply said, I'd like to suspend the card immediately. No charges authorized from this moment on. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard, sealing a chapter she didn't know she was part of. When she confirmed, I thanked her and ended the call. A soft calm washed over me, the kind that comes when you finally take back something that was always yours, your boundaries. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was restoration. A gentle reclaiming of dignity I had allowed others to borrow for far too long. I had no guilt, no hesitation, only relief. A relief that settled into my bones like warm tea on a cold evening. As I prepared breakfast, I imagined the scene unfolding at that Italian restaurant. My daughter-in-law, proud as a peacock, passing the card to the waiter with a smug smile. And then declined. Again. And again. Her face crumpling as reality arrived, uninvited, like I had been. The hum of the restaurant continuing around her, oblivious, while she tried to salvage the evening she had crafted to impress everyone but me. A perfect little disaster. For a moment, I wondered if I should warn my son. Not to protect her, she had dug her own hole, but to soften the humiliation he would face standing beside her. But then I remembered all the times he had stayed silent while she chipped away at my dignity. Silence has a price. And finally, life was sending the bill. A quiet bill, handwritten in karma. By sunset, it no longer felt like a decision, it felt like justice. I wasn't excluding myself. I was withdrawing my voluntary participation in my own mistreatment. And as I cooked my simple dinner that night, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to raise my voice, confront anyone, or make a scene. All I had to do was stop funding hers. The next morning, the family group chat lit up like fireworks. My daughter-in-law sent another photo, this time of her expensive heels. She wrote, "Can't wait for the perfect night." The same night she ensured I had no place in. I sipped my coffee quietly, watching the digital parade of shallow excitement unfold. My son commented with heart emojis. Her sister chimed in with clapping hands. Not a single person wondered why I said nothing. But then something interesting happened. The more she posted, the more desperate she sounded. It was as if she needed an audience to validate her image. A woman who lives for show always panics when her spotlight flickers. And unknowingly, she had already unplugged the power source for that spotlight. She just didn't know it yet. I stayed silent in the chat. Silence, when chosen, is powerful. It makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to face themselves. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to explain. I only needed to wait. Because when someone builds their reputation on appearances, all it takes is one honest moment for everything to collapse. But then Lily messaged me privately. "Grandma, why aren't you going to the dinner? Mom said you didn't feel like it." That message struck deeper than any of the others. My Nora didn't just erase me. She rewrote me. That's worse. That's cruel. And when someone manipulates children to reshape reality, consequences become necessary. I responded simply, "I wasn't invited, sweetheart. But that's okay. Have fun." I couldn't burden her with adult truths. But inside me, something hardened quietly. Not anger, principle. A principle that said, enough. I had overlooked, forgiven, swallowed, and requadraw countless small offenses. But this crossed a line too sacred to ignore. It was in that moment that I made my second decision. Not only would the dinner collapse, I would ensure it never happened at all. Not through drama, not through confrontation, but through truth delivered at the perfect moment. A truth that would echo in ways she never saw coming. Saturday night arrived like any other. While they dressed up, posed for photos, and headed out for their glamorous evening, I put on my favorite record and brewed a lavender tea. I didn't wait for messages. I didn't wait for an apology. I simply let the night unfold as naturally as rain falling on a dry roof. And right on cue, my phone began buzzing at 9:17 p.m. "Mom, call me. Emergency. Restaurant says payment declined. Did you block the card?" Then, from her, "There's something wrong with your card. It's causing a scene here." I laughed softly. My card causing a scene. The irony could have fed a theater audience. I waited, letting panic simmer, letting realization bloom. Only after a few minutes did I respond. Calm, composed, elegantly sharp. "Oh, you used the card tonight?" I assumed I wasn't part of this evening. I suspended it because it was being used without my knowledge. "I hope your dinner goes well." Her response came instantly, long, emotional, furious. My son tried calling. Her sister left the chat. The illusion shattered. The night she crafted so carefully had dissolved in a single text from me. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't been rude. I had simply set a boundary they never expected me to have. Their perfect dinner ended before it even began. And me? I leaned back in my armchair, music filling the room, tea warming my hands, heart steady and unbothered. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting for a place at their table. I was reclaiming my own. The next morning, I woke up to a pile of messages that could have filled a small book. My son had written long paragraphs about how embarrassed they were at the restaurant, how the manager had to pull them aside, how other guests had started staring. He said the word humiliated at least 3 times. But do you know what word never appeared?
Sorry.
Not once. It was as if the real crime wasn't how they treated me, but how I dared to remove my money from the equation. He insisted I should have talked to him first before blocking the card, as if I were an employee who'd failed to follow protocol. For years, I had watched him quietly stand by while his wife spoke to me like I was a burden disguised as a blessing. Now, suddenly, he had a voice, just not for the right cause. There was something almost tragically familiar about that. People often find their courage only when it favors their comfort, not their conscience. I read his messages twice, then set the phone down and made myself breakfast. I decided not to respond immediately. Older women like me have learned that timing is as powerful as truth. When I finally replied, I wrote only what needed to be said. I made the conditions clear when I allowed the card to be used. They were ignored. That's not my responsibility. It's yours. No exclamation points, no anger, just a calm declaration of reality. A few hours later, my daughter-in-law sent me a long voice message for minutes of a performance dripping with self-pity and accusation. She called me dramatic, cruel, and spiteful. She said a woman my age should know better than to create unnecessary chaos. I held the phone in my hand, listening to the woman who excluded me from her celebration lecture me about family and respect. When she finished, I didn't even bother keeping the audio. I deleted it. Some things don't deserve to live in your memory, much less in your phone. My son called later that afternoon, his tone softer this time. He tried to translate her words, to smooth her rough edges, to make her sound more reasonable than she had been. She didn't mean it that way, Mom. She was just upset, he said. I let him speak, then asked him one question. Did she invite me? Silence. Heavy, revealing silence. Then I asked, did she lie to Lily about why I wasn't there? The silence deepened. Sometimes truth doesn't need volume. It only needs a question no one wants to answer. Before hanging up, I said one last thing. When people hurt you and then blame you for how you react, they're not sorry. They're scared. Scared of losing the control they thought they had over you. He didn't respond right away. I could feel the wheels turning behind his silence. And for the first time, I sensed something shifting, not in me, but in him. 2 days later, I heard a knock at my door. Not the light, polite kind that neighbors use, but the hesitant, heavy kind that belongs to someone carrying more than just their body weight. When I opened it, there stood my son alone. No wife, no children, just him, with tired eyes and a posture that looked like it had been caving in for years. Mom, he said, voice low, can I come in? As if there were ever a world where I'd say no. He sat on the couch and stared at the floor for a long moment, like a child waiting to be scolded. But I said nothing. I knew if I gave him silence, he'd eventually fill it with truth. And he did. He confessed that, yes, she had purposely left me out. Yes, she had said it would be less awkward if I didn't come. Yes, she had lied to Lily, so the little girl wouldn't question her. Every word he shared landed like a stone in a pond, rippling out through years of ignored instincts. He apologized, really apologized this time. Not for the blocked card, not for the embarrassment, but for his silence. For all the times he'd watched her talk over me, roll her eyes, dismiss my presence like I was furniture instead of family. He admitted something I had always felt but never heard. She didn't want me visiting you so often. She said you were too much drama and too old-fashioned. She controlled my phone sometimes. She'd delete your messages and tell me you were overreacting. It didn't surprise me, but hearing it made the wound both fresh and clean. I listened to him with a patience only a mother can offer, even after everything. When he finished, I stood up and went to the kitchen. We'll need tea for this, I said with a small smile. While the kettle heated, I let his words settle. They weren't just confessions, they were cracks forming in the life he'd been pretending was solid. And cracks, sooner or later, always bring the whole structure down. When I brought the tea back, I said softly, "You know, I never blamed you for marrying her. I blamed you for letting her change how you treated me." His eyes filled with tears then, raw and unshielded. He whispered, "I think I forgot who I was, Mom." I reached out, touched his hand, and replied, "No, dear. You didn't forget. You just stopped listening. Tonight you started again. That's what matters." For the first time in years, my son wasn't sitting in my living room as a married man defending his wife. He was sitting there as my boy, remembering where he came from. By the time he left, his shoulders seemed slightly lighter. He hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. When the door closed behind him, I felt the faintest hint of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not foolish hope that everything would magically fix itself, but sober hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally found a voice in him too. While my son's eyes were slowly opening, my daughter-in-law's carefully curated version of events began to collapse under its own weight. She had been telling anyone who would listen that I sabotaged the dinner out of jealousy, that I craved attention, that I couldn't stand not being at the center anymore. It was dramatic, I'll give her that. But what her story lacked was something simple: consistency. Her friends started asking uncomfortable questions. "Wait, but why didn't you invite his mother? You used her card without asking? You told your daughter grandma didn't want to come?" Every question tugged at a loose thread she thought no one else could see. But when you live for impressions, any minor pull can unravel the whole outfit. And that's exactly what began to happen, quietly, slowly, inevitably. She tried to fix her story, like someone patching a sinking boat with stickers. She added details, removed others, changed the tone, softened the motives. But the more she edited, the more obvious it became that there was something rotten underneath. Her own mother, I heard later, told her she'd gone too far. "Whatever issues you have, you don't lie about someone's mother to their child," she'd said. That sentence probably hurt more than anything I could have come up with myself. Meanwhile, my son watched her scramble to maintain control and didn't recognize the woman he had married. It wasn't that she had suddenly changed, it was that the mask she wore finally didn't fit the moment. He told me in a later phone call that he saw, maybe for the first time, how easily she twisted stories, how confidently she used others to shield herself from accountability. "I thought she was just emotional," he said. "Now I see she's strategic. There's a big difference between the two." I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply went about my life, watering my plants, baking my bread, and listening to my old records. I didn't need to interfere. Life was doing an excellent job of exposing what needed to be exposed. My only task was to stay out of the way and refuse to be dragged back into a role I no longer accepted, the silent victim. One afternoon, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who had survived more storms than she could count, and yet, here she was, standing tall after another one. I touched the lines around my eyes and smiled. Those lines weren't signs of weakness. They were proof that I had lived long enough to go from begging for a seat at the table to realizing I could build my own. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang and her name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But then I thought, no. Let's hear how she spins it directly this time. I answered with a simple, "Hello." No warmth, no hostility, just a neutral doorway for whatever she chose to walk in with. Her voice on the other end was carefully composed, like a person trying to sound calm while holding a shaking glass. "Evelyn," she began, "I think this whole situation got blown out of proportion." That was her opening. No regret, no remorse, just minimization. She went on to say that she didn't mean to hurt me, that she assumed I'd be tired, that she wanted a more modern environment for the celebration and thought I wouldn't enjoy it. It was a script, one she'd no doubt rehearsed in the mirror. But the problem with rehearsed apologies is that they always sound like defense with makeup on. I let her talk, not interrupting once. She circled around phrases like misunderstanding, wrong impression, and family harmony. She never once used the words, "I was wrong." When she finally stopped, I took a breath and spoke as clearly as I could. The problem wasn't the dinner, I said. The problem was the lie. You didn't just leave me out. You invented a version of me to justify it to your daughter. The line went quiet. Truly quiet. It was the kind of silence that tells you your words have landed somewhere they can't easily be brushed away. She tried to respond, but her voice faltered. She started a sentence, then abandoned it halfway. Finally, she said, "I didn't think it would be such a big deal." That was the truest thing she'd said so far. "That's exactly the issue," I replied. "You didn't think the woman who watches your children, helps pay your bills, and has stood by your husband for decades was a big deal." My tone wasn't angry. It was exhausted. Ancient. It carried not just this hurt, but every tiny dismissal that had led us here. "I won't argue with you," I continued. "I've outgrown fights that go nowhere. But I need you to understand something. Respect is not optional. Not in this family. Not with me." She cleared her throat, then asked, almost defensively, "So, what do you want from me?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "That's the beauty of this. I finally stopped wanting your approval, your invitations, your performances. I just wanted to reclaim my part in all of this. And I did." There was another stretch of silence. Then, suddenly, she ended the call. I stared at the darkened screen for a moment, then placed the phone gently on the table. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, light. Not the kind that comes from others validating you, but the kind that appears when you finally step away from a place you were never truly welcomed in. A few days later, I received a message from my son that felt different from the frantic ones he'd sent earlier. It was softer, hesitant, almost childlike. He asked if I'd like to come over for a small dinner, just him, Lily, and me. No glamour, no pretenses, no audience. "I want to celebrate properly," he wrote. "Just us." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a warmth spread across my chest. It wasn't the dinner that mattered. It was the intention behind it. The first genuine gesture from him in a very long time. I accepted, and on the evening of the dinner, I brought my homemade apple pie, the one Lily loved so much. When I arrived, she ran into my arms, hugging me with a sincerity that children can't fake. The house felt calmer without her mother there, as if the walls themselves were relieved to have a night off from tension. My son cooked pasta that was slightly burnt, but we pretended it was gourmet. Lily set the table with mismatched plates, saying it made everything feel cozy. It was imperfect in all the ways that make real moments beautiful. We laughed. We talked. We breathed. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw my son relaxed. He didn't look over his shoulder before speaking. He didn't shrink his words to accommodate someone else's reactions. He was simply himself. And as we ate, I realized something heartbreaking. He had been starving for this kind of peace. Starving silently, while calling it compromise. A man can get used to emotional hunger if no one shows him a full meal. Later, when Lily went to her room, my son admitted that his wife was furious about our dinner. She had refused to come out of their bedroom, claiming to be overwhelmed. I didn't need details. People who thrive on control always crumble when they lose their grip. Instead of engaging with her tantrum, I focused on the moment in front of me. My son was sitting at my side, choosing me voluntarily, something he hadn't done in a very long time. Before leaving, he hugged me longer than usual, as if trying to gather strength from a place he had forgotten existed. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "I didn't ask for what. I already knew. It wasn't for the pie, or the dinner, or the company. It was for the boundary I set, one that gave him permission to finally look at his own life clearly." When I drove home that night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded, affirmed, and quietly proud of the woman I had become. For years, they had made me feel like an optional presence in my own family. But this dinner reminded me of a truth I had forgotten. I was never optional. I had simply stopped demanding the place I'd earned. And now, without raising my voice or pleading for space, I had reclaimed it. Softly. Elegantly. Completely. The next weekend, Lily messaged me asking if she could come over. I agreed immediately, And when she arrived, she hugged me with a depth that made my heart ache. Children always sense the truth before adults do. She sat at my kitchen table, swinging her legs under the chair, and said, "Grandma, I didn't like how Mom talked about you. It wasn't kind." Her innocence cut sharper than any accusation. Kids don't exaggerate. They observe. We spent the afternoon baking cookies and watching old movies. At one point, she said, "It's calmer here." That simple sentence carried an entire story inside it. Children don't always have the vocabulary for dysfunction, but they feel it. And Lily, sweet and perceptive, had felt enough to crave refuge. I held her a little tighter that day, not because she needed it, but because I did. That evening, my son called again. This time, his voice wasn't frantic, it was contemplative. He told me he had been sleeping on the couch for 3 nights. Not because of me, but because of the arguments that erupted after the dinner. "She said I embarrassed her by talking to you," he said. "But I didn't say anything bad. I just told the truth." His voice cracked. Truth is like oxygen. When someone's been deprived of it long enough, breathing it hurts at first. He admitted he didn't recognize the person he had become in that marriage. He didn't like how he spoke, how he reacted, how he rationalized her behavior. "I think I got lost," he confessed. "And I didn't even notice." I listened without interrupting, knowing he needed to spill years of silence into a space that could hold it without judgment. And I told him something simple. Sometimes you have to break routine to notice it was a cage. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he whispered, "Mom, thank you." I didn't ask what he meant. Gratitude reveals itself when someone is finally ready to stop living on emotional autopilot. I hung up the phone feeling neither triumphant nor vengeful, but relieved. The truth was no longer trapped in my mouth. My son finally carried part of it too. That night, I slept deeply. Not because everything was fixed, but because something essential had finally shifted. The first crack had appeared in the facade, and light was pouring through. Change rarely arrives loudly. Most times it whispers. And that evening, it whispered in the voice of my son remembering who he used to be. While my son was quietly dismantling his illusions, my daughter-in-law was busy trying to salvage hers. She continued telling everyone who'd listened that I had intentionally sabotaged her birthday out of jealousy. But stories built on lies crumble when questioned, and that's exactly what began happening. Her friends weren't as gullible as she expected. They asked, "But why didn't you invite her? Why use her card without permission? Why tell your daughter something that wasn't true?" Each question chipped away at her narrative like an ice pick against glass. Her tone changed. Her confidence wavered. She added details one day and removed them the next. Conflicting versions started leaking out. At one point, she claimed I had insisted on not coming. But when someone asked for screenshots, she quickly backtracked. People like her forget that manipulation requires consistency, and consistency requires truth, something she didn't have on her side. The more she spoke, the less believable she became. Her mother reportedly confronted her as well. Told her she was wrong. Told her respect must flow upward in a family, not downward. That alone must have shaken her. My daughter-in-law lives for approval, family approval, social approval, online approval. So, when the cracks in her story began spreading publicly, she panicked. Not for moral reasons, but because exposure is kryptonite to people who survive on image. Meanwhile, my son observed everything quietly. He watched her lie effortlessly to friends, then contradict herself hours later. He watched how she deflected, how she attacked anyone who questioned her, how she twisted words into shapes that only made sense in her head. And with every passing day, his admiration faded. His confusion faded. His denial faded. Truth has a way of peeling back emotional blindness layer by layer. Through all of this, I remained silent. Not detached, just centered. I had no desire to engage in her chaos. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to expose her. Life was taking care of that all by itself. My job was simply to stay still, steady, and aligned with my own dignity. And as I sat in my garden that week, pruning my roses, I realized something beautiful. I wasn't just witnessing the collapse of her story. I was witnessing the return of mine. Because for years, she had written me as the villain, the inconvenience, the outdated relic. But now, the truth was writing itself again, and I was finally being portrayed in the role I always deserved. The mother who loved, the grandmother who stayed, the woman who refused to be erased. A few afternoons later, I stopped by the grocery store for some essentials. As I reached for a bag of flour, I heard someone call my name. It was one of my daughter-in-law's friends, the kind who always posted inspirational quotes, but lived a life that contradicted all of them. She approached me carefully, as if stepping into a story she suddenly realized she didn't understand. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" Her tone was cautious, almost apologetic. I nodded and she continued, "Why didn't you go to the dinner? She told us you didn't feel like being around people." The lie rolled out of her mouth like a rehearsed line in a theater play. I didn't react emotionally. Instead, I offered her a smile filled with the exact amount of truth she needed. "I didn't go because I wasn't invited," I said plainly. "That's all." Her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. Recognition that she'd been fed a version designed to manipulate her sympathy. She apologized immediately, saying she didn't know, saying she believed what she was told, saying she felt awful. I didn't hold it against her. People can only operate with the information they're given. But watching her face crumble as the truth dawned on her was strangely satisfying, not because I wanted her to feel bad, but because the truth was finally stepping out from behind the curtain. That moment created a ripple effect. Within hours, I'm sure the truth had traveled through their social circle like wildfire. And something became very clear. My daughter-in-law feared embarrassment more than she feared being wrong. Being caught in a lie is one thing. Being publicly caught is another. For someone who curated her life like a highlight reel, this was devastating. But the most interesting part? I didn't lift a finger. I didn't say a word to anyone else. I didn't expose her. She exposed herself. People like her always do. And as I walked out of the store with my groceries, I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. I felt free. Free from a story I never asked to be part of. Free from the shadows she tried to push me into. Free from the role she assigned me without my consent. And for the first time in years, I understood a profound truth. When you reclaim your dignity, you reclaim your narrative. And mine was finally being told again, honestly, clearly, and with the strength I had forgotten I still possessed. In the days that followed the grocery store incident, my son became noticeably distant from his wife. Not hostile, just observantly quiet, as if he were collecting puzzle pieces he had ignored for years. He told me he had begun replaying past moments, times she spoke for him, times she dismissed him, times he walked on eggshells without realizing it. Awareness is a peculiar thing. Once it begins, it doesn't stop. It spreads. It clarifies. It rearranges everything you thought was normal into everything you now realize was wrong. One evening, he called me, and I could hear the fatigue in his voice. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think I've been enabling her behavior. I think I kept the peace by losing myself." Those words hit me like a gust of wind. Gentle, but strong. They weren't just confessions, they were transformations. I listened, letting him open his heart without interruption. A mother doesn't need to fill silence. She only needs to hold it while her child grows inside it. He admitted that his wife had been spinning new narratives within her family, painting herself as the victim of my unpredictable behavior. But the cracks were showing. Her own sister questioned her version. Her mother confronted her again. The web of half-truths she wove was collapsing under the simple weight of reality. "She's losing control," he said, almost to himself. "She's not used to people seeing through her." I told him something I had learned long ago. People reveal who they are when they start losing their audience. He didn't answer immediately, but I could feel him absorbing the words. They weren't just about her, they were about him too. He was realizing how much of his life had been shaped by fear disguised as harmony. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. Over the next few days, Lily spent more time with me. My son insisted it was just to give her space, but I knew better. Children seek the environment where their spirit can breathe. And in my home, Lily breathed freely. She helped me cook. She listened to old stories. She asked questions about family, about honesty, about kindness. Simple questions that made the truth clearer than any adult conversation ever could. As I watched her laugh one afternoon, I felt something shift inside me too. I wasn't just reclaiming my dignity, I was reclaiming my place in the generational line. A place my daughter-in-law had worked hard to erase. But she forgot one thing. Roots run deeper than branches. You can try to cut a tree from the top, but if the roots remain strong, the tree grows back. Stronger, straighter, unshakable. The next Sunday morning, I received a message from my daughter-in-law requesting to talk in person. Her tone was stiffly polite, the kind of politeness that grows from necessity rather than sincerity. I hesitated. Part of me wanted closure. Another part wanted to protect my peace. But eventually I agreed. Not for her sake, for my own clarity. Sometimes you need to face the person who hurt you just to confirm how far you've grown beyond them. She arrived at my home wearing her best neutrality expression, the one that hides insecurity under layers of performative grace. She sat on my couch, crossed her legs, and began speaking in a slow, rehearsed voice. She said she wanted to apologize if she made me feel excluded. The moment she used the word if, I knew the apology was hollow. Real apologies acknowledge harm. Fake ones acknowledge inconvenience. I let her continue. She said she didn't want miscommunication to tear the family apart. She said she valued harmony. She said she wanted to start fresh. Every sentence was a polished stone she carefully placed between us, hoping it would build a bridge. But bridges built from dishonesty collapse the moment someone steps on them. And I had no intention of crossing anything that fragile. When she finally finished her monologue, I asked her one simple question. Why did you lie to Lily? That question stripped every layer of her performance. Her face tightened. Her composure cracked. She tried to recover, but explaining a lie without admitting it is impossible. She fumbled over her words, offering excuses that contradicted each other like two mismatched shoes. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice steady. You didn't exclude me by accident. You excluded me with intention. And you didn't lie to Lily to protect her. You lied to protect yourself. Her eyes flickered with something between anger and fear. But I didn't let her interrupt. You don't have to like me. You don't have to invite me anywhere. But you will not rewrite who I am. She looked down then, realizing that I wasn't the soft target she'd grown used to. I wasn't the woman who swallowed her disrespect quietly. I had boundaries now. Boundaries she couldn't manipulate, twist, or guilt trip. And when she finally whispered, "What do you want from me?" I answered with the truth she never expected. Nothing. I don't need anything from you anymore. That was the moment she understood she had lost the power she thought she had over me. And power, once lost, rarely returns. The following week, my son told me something that confirmed everything I had already sensed. He said he overheard his wife complaining to her friends again, retelling the story of the ruined dinner with new embellishments that contradicted the version she had told him just days earlier. She said I blocked the card out of spite, that I had screamed at her on the phone, that I had thrown a tantrum like a jealous child. None of it was true. But people who fear accountability often weaponize fiction. My son said he didn't intervene at first, but then something inside him snapped. He told her, calmly but firmly, that he was done protecting her lies. That he was tired of being the buffer between her and reality. My mother didn't ruin anything, he said. You did. He told me her expression went blank, like someone who had just lost a game they didn't know they were playing. She called him manipulated. She said he was being dramatic. When that didn't work, she cried. Tears meant to script sympathy. But my son didn't bend this time. He told her he was exhausted by the constant rewriting of history, the emotional pressure, the guilt games. He realized he wasn't just losing his marriage, he was losing himself. I'm not the man I wanted to be, he admitted. And I can't keep blaming everyone else for that. Those were his words. Honest. Heavy. Transformative. She tried to pull him back with promises, then threats, then denial. None of it worked. That night, he packed a bag and stayed at a friend's house. Not for separation, not yet, but for space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to detach from the noise that had consumed his home for years. He texted me, "I'm okay, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I'm okay." And I believed him. Meanwhile, Lily stayed with me for a few nights. She felt lighter, happier, almost relieved. Children sense tension like animals sense storms. And when the storm lifted, even temporarily, she bloomed. As we baked cookies together one evening, she said, "Grandma, it feels peaceful here." Peace. A word she had probably never used to describe her home. That week marked a quiet turning point. Not dramatic, not loud, but decisive. It was the week my son stopped surrendering to a life that suffocated him. The week Lily felt safe again. And the week my daughter-in-law realized she could no longer control the narrative. The truth had finally rooted itself too deeply to be uprooted. The final unraveling happened on a Tuesday afternoon. My daughter-in-law showed up at my house without warning, her face pale and stiff. She wasn't there for reconciliation. She was there because everything around her was collapsing, her lies, her influence, her control, her audience. "I just want to know," she said sharply, standing in my doorway, "why you had to ruin everything." I didn't invite her inside. I simply stood there, steady and unshakable. "I didn't ruin anything," I replied. "I stopped participating in something that was already broken." Her jaw tightened, but I didn't give her space to interrupt. "You excluded me. You lied about me. You used me when it suited you, and erased me when it didn't. And when consequences finally arrived, you mistook them for cruelty." She tried to argue, but I raised a hand gently. "No more." The two words hung between us like a closing door. "I won't fight you," I continued. "I won't defend myself against stories you invent. And I won't let you use my kindness as a weapon against me ever again." Her eyes flickered, not with anger, but with realization. She had lost, not because I defeated her, but because I stepped out of the battlefield entirely. She stood there for a few seconds, breathing hard, then turned away. As she walked down my front path, shoulders tense, steps shaky, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. Not gloating, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally reclaim your place after years of being pushed aside. Later that evening, my son stopped by. Lily ran into my arms. We ate dinner together, nothing fancy, just warm food shared by people who truly cared about one another. As they left, my son hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not disappearing." I didn't answer. I simply squeezed his hand. When I closed the door behind them, I felt the sweetest form of revenge settle into my heart. Not revenge made of anger, but revenge made of truth. Revenge made of dignity. Revenge made of finally valuing myself enough to walk away from what diminished me. Because the sweetest revenge isn't destroying someone's life. The sweetest revenge is rebuilding your own.